Wasting my life being on the wrong path. That quote stopped me in my tracks. Imagine this. You're having a dinner and you've invited all your closest friends and you want to have that deep, meaningful conversations. Have you ever been in one of those? And there'll be that one sentence that will open up everybody to share their lived experiences. That quote was that for me. It was taken from the book Meditations of a Former Statue, a novel, a memoir, an obsession. And this week's guest is none other than the author itself, Angela Gabriela Horne. Let me tell you, I wanted to know the woman behind these amazing quotes because this was just one of those quotes in that book. And she unpacked her lived experiences. She shared and opened up about her heritage, her career, and so many rich stories that I was practically hanging on her lip for more. Gabriela has lived a very interesting life, but more than that, she comes from an amazing heritage. And sometimes being of different cultures, it can have such a deep impact on us that we don't even realize it until we have to write something like a book. And she had to open up and share these stories. So listening to all the different ways that made this book come alive, it was amazing to listen to. I really hope that you found as much inspiration as I did by just sitting down and listening to the person behind the book. And I would be super interested to know what you thought about it towards the end. And I do apologize. There were bits and pieces where the audio cut off on my end, but that doesn't take away her story. Enjoy this week's episode.
Okay. So I was thinking about something, and I think this is a really nice way to segue into the podcast. You're speaking about, AI and what that means. And then there's a sentence you actually create, and I'm reading it in the book right now. It goes, Eleanor replied, this was her reply, when she was asked, what is it that you fear? And I liked what you said. It was wasting my life being on the wrong path. And I thought that stuck out because I do ask myself a lot about that. Was that at the beginning of your path?
I think it was when the path diverged.
So can you take me back to that? So people don't know you, so I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
I did. I spent...
So your heritage. Let's start with that because that gives a lot of context around everything we're going to speak about.
Yes, my father came from India. He settled in the UK in the 1950s. He met my mother.
Which part of India?
From Bengal.
Okay.
And my mother came from southern Italy, and they settled here. She settled here in the 50s. They met and married in 1960, which, interracial marriages were rare then, and there was a lot of hostility in the 1960s in the UK. So my sister and I were born, clearly not fitting into any racial stereotype. We didn't quite fit into the Asian. People could see there was some Asian sort of heritage with us. And my mother would say that, she was Caucasian and, blonde and dark-haired with some blonde streaks from the Italian sun. And I inherited her mad hair, by the way. My sister's got the glossy Indian hair, but I've got the mad Italian hair. But she would say that, she would walk outside a supermarket, and if we called her name, said Ma, people would turn and look shocked because of the difference in colours of our skin tone. And it was my mother was like, oh my God, people really, but that was at the time. Now people don't look twice, But it was almost as though we were growing up in a kind of psychic war zone, not quite sure where we fit in. And I think I remember spending a lot of my childhood trying to fit in and only realized later in life that I was never meant to.
I find it very interesting, the word trying to fit in. We still have that conversations today. At least I have them quite often with when people ask me, where are you from and what do you do? And you just go, okay, here we go with that question,
Yes.
And you said something very interesting with that, which I have not heard yet, psychological warfare. That's a heavy word.
Yes.
Why do you call it that?
you can sense them. Because any sensitive person, sort of empathetic person, you'd be able to pick up where there's some hostility and some suspicion from someone. If you're nearby at the time, especially because we didn't. So it felt like the best armor was to be charming and to speak well and that sort of relaxed people. But it was more like having a kind of courage to be yourself, regardless of what you think other people think. So I mean, I was shy. Yeah.
Did you? So when you go wasting my life being on the wrong path, how much of your influence, how much of your heritage influenced that?
Not so much, actually, because I know that my parents wanted me to be, a doctor out of love. They said, well, it's a lot of my Indian side of the family, a lot of them are in the medical profession, surgeons, psychiatrists, whatever. But my Indian grandfather was a country doctor. His normal job was to cycle through the jungle with a rifle on his back, because in case of the Royal Bengal tigers were around, So it's quite, I know it's mad, isn't it? But that's what my father told me, the stories. And, but it was more about my ego. It's like the desire for the kind of prestige and identity, that was trying to draw validation from outside of myself, which I learnt. Thankfully, years back, was not the way forward.
So what was it like? Okay, so you said that growing up, you already knew that you and your sister were in this, wasn't tolerated. I'm not sure if the word tolerated, but you were like the, what I always say, the exotic bird. Yes. People would always consider you the exotic bird, right? Because you were just, oh my God, you do all that. And
yes.
And then you'd always be felt right away. You were pushed as being different, right? How did you manage? Walk me through what it's like growing up in your teens over here.
Yes. I mean, I was born here, but so I still, in a way, I'm English in one way as well. But I've also was aware that, very strong Italian and Indian heritage, and yes, in the teens it was a little bit confusing because I was thinking, my gosh, such a disparate cultures coming together. How do I make sense of this? It can drive anyone crazy. But then I looked for similarities, and I saw so many, like in the Italian and Indian cultures, they both have colorful religions, fabulous, cuisines, money, family is very important. So it's a lot of family occasions. They're very similar. In fact, when my father first visited Italy, he was just accepted like, oh, you're the same as us. So even though, and there are people in Sicily who are darker than he is, because of the Arab and the Greek influence sort of thing there from Sicily. But my mother was further north, between Rome and Naples she came from. And, so I saw
and
that.
Southern Italy is much different than Northern Italy as well.
Yes, that's right. They tend to, they can be, the Northern Italy is more industrialized. There was more rural, I think, in the south. And so a lot of, factories were built in the south because it was to form employment, to create employment. So, but yes.
So what was it like growing up in your teens? So you were here?
Yeah, that's here. Yeah, I was here, but we would travel regularly to Italy for the summer, and so I was aware of having this dual privilege in a sense that I would hear my English classmates say, "Oh, sorry, the light's gone a bit mad." So I hear my English classmates say, "Oh, I'm just going down the road to see my nan," and I'm going, So yes, I remember being at primary school, hearing someone in my class saying, "I'm going down the road to see my nan," and I'm going, I need to get on a bus, a train, a boat, a plane. to go and see my grandma. And in India, we didn't see my Indian grandma until I was 15, 16 years old. And that was a very long flight. Very long flight. I flew Pan Am. Would you believe Pan Am? We flew Pan Am to Delhi.
Okay, that is definitely in the olden days. I'm not sure if many people remember Pan Am.
No, Pan Am. No, that's it. 1988, they folded with the Lockerbie disaster. But I remember the name of this Boeing 747. We boarded. In those days, you boarded by walking along the tarmac and going up the stairs, and there you were. You see this massive Rolls-Royce engine, this enormous, the turbines, and I'm going, wow. And then getting in, and I hated flying. I hated it. But then those big birds, when they took off, they were so elegant and so slow. That was it. My end of my fear of flying, because it was it was a multi-stop service in those days. It was like a bus stop. It was around the world trip. You just kept going. Was it London, Heathrow, Frankfurt, I think Tehran. I landed in Tehran just before the revolution. It was incredible experience. My goodness. And then Dubai, I think, and then Delhi. And then it went on to Hong Kong, I think Rangoon and Hong Kong. So, so these were...
So you'd get off Delhi and then you'd take another flight, I guess, or you'd take the bus.
To Calcutta. No, there was another flight to Calcutta. Yeah, so that's where my family moved to after partition. Yeah, they were. Yeah, so... But, so it was very... but no, I think it was very rich, experience. Many of my classmates didn't have that experience. The fact that we traveled...
I know that's... Yeah.
Because we traveled to see family, it wasn't because we were jetting off on holiday. Some of my classmates said, "You're flying away somewhere again? What's going on?" They thought we were jet setters, because it wasn't normal in the 70s to fly, anywhere, unless you were emigrating. So,
I felt that was same thing in the 80s as well. It didn't change much until the 90s, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
When you speak about the partition, I know I'm also from... I would say my background has partition in it. So my grandfather's side of the, from my dad's side, they used to live in Pakistan, and then the partition happened. They transferred over.
Yes.
So how much, and sometimes I listen now to the stories of my mom and about my grandmothers, and did not realize how much, and that's what made me wake up to the heritage and the survival was woven into the culture now as a woman.
Yeah.
Did you experience that? I mean, you said you went when you were 15, you went then to Calcutta.
Yes.
Were you already aware of the consequence of partition, or was it?
Yes. My father told me stories because my Indian grandparents had just built their home in, I think it's just outside what is Sylhet, which is now Bangladesh. It was India then. And, and he tells me stories where they just had to leave because they were Hindus in an area that was declared Muslim, just as there were Muslims who were in West Bengal who had to move. So there was a lot of trauma on all sides. And yes, he tells me, he was, I think, he probably was in his teens, and he was on a railway platform, not with his family, not knowing where they're going to stay that night. And even today, he gets stressed by traveling.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I realized now that every time we were, getting on a plane to go to Italy to see the family in the summer, he'd come out in awful rashes. He'd get really short-tempered, and I didn't understand. And then only as a mature woman did I understand. Of course, it's triggering him. He was triggered. So I had a lot more compassion. Yes, and
so how much of this has really been woven into your book? Because I know you're
a lot of it. I mean, if you have parents, both my parents were traumatized by war zones, 2 different war zones. My mum from World War II, her hometown was completely destroyed by, the bombings, air raids and things, and because it was actually a battlefront between the Allies and the German forces at the time, enemy forces. And so she saw things that no 10-year-old should ever see. and she would tell us stories. My sister and I grew up listening to stories. We thought they were horror fairy tales, but they were true. And so she would tell us these stories. So I think that's probably why I'm a writer today, because of all the stories that, would switch off the TV and she'd tell us stories. And my sister too is a writer. She's
she is
working on a screenplay sort of thing. I'm nagging her to get it done. So yeah, but it's and I'm sure that's the reason why. But I think anyone where the generation above you has been touched by war, it defines you as well.
The word trauma related has only, I would say, recently. It's a fairly recent conversation. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us, I don't know if you had it, but at least I did. Everything was kept in the house, right? All the stories were kept in the house. When you go out of your house, you don't take those stories with you. At least that's what I was told. So it made me wonder, did you ever know or realize when that trauma you were taking on of it? Or were you aware of it, or were you just like, no, I'm changing this?
I think as when I grew up, I realized, there's such a thing. Apparently, I learnt later on that I was editing a friend's book. She was writing about children who had been traumatized by, neglectful parents or toxic parenting for the foster system. And she talks about secondary trauma, where because of the actions of the person who is being triggered, you yourself also get affected. It can damage you as well. Constantly having to be on tiptoe, constantly watching everything you say or do. The inability to have perhaps a normal relationship because you're always on high alert. And then it had me look at my family, went, okay, I can understand, and I can understand where my parents were coming from. I can have compassion. And also, choosing to live with my parents in my mature age, I chose to do that because it also triggered a huge spiritual awakening because I had to grow up. So it's really good.
Okay, but the word awakening, I'm always curious about it. You're saying it was growing up. Can you give me an example what that would be like?
Well, yes, in that instead of blaming my mother or my father for something where I feel, if I felt some distress, I took ownership and said, okay, this is how I'm feeling today, or this is what's going on. It's more about taking responsibility. Where do I have cause in this? And it changed everything.
How did it change everything?
Well, no, could you
give me an example?
Well, no, it meant I can, how can I give an example? There's so many little things like my mother would say something to imply, or she would to imply that perhaps I wasn't being good enough or being, So I would just say, yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, I could do this better or that, or it didn't work, and I owned it, and it took out the emotional sting, and it gave a lot of freedom, and also opened up space in the relationship for just to be ourselves.
Did she sense that?
Yes, she had a difficult time. Some of the stories she would tell us, they were so vivid, as though they happened yesterday, but it was 70 years ago.
So she was always guarded then, sounds like.
Yeah, very guarded, very, she's a very passionate, driven woman and very intelligent as well. But also I can see where she could never really relax. I know she was always, they call it hypervigilance. Now I know what that means.
Yeah. So that comes back to this one. There are two things that I liked in the book. And when it popped out, I was like, I can relate to it. But you go, instead, learn the law of allowing, the hidden path of serendipity, where all things flow in perfect time and perfect place. And then following on a couple of pages later, you wrote, human beings create sorrow to relive the dramas of their ancestors. And we relive their pain and sorrow to honor and love them. And that sentence got me thinking. It says, okay, there's the law of allowance, and there is relive their pain and sorrow to honor and love them. And I almost find that, how do you reconcile that?
Yes, because it's more like reliving the pain is almost unconscious. It's like I realized I had to unlearn many emotional patterns of my parents because they learned.
So that's the allowance, right?
That's in a way, that's the allowance, in allowing myself to be my true self, while also honoring my parents. So I had to learn to disconnect from my emotional patterning of them to actually redirect that to develop, more empowering ways to be and being true to myself while also still loving them and having compassion and honoring them.
I'm thinking about it because I'm always reflecting on it. I struggled a lot with Western therapy. And the reason I struggled a lot is because I always felt like it kept victimizing my mom and dad. And oh, don't you realize your parents? And I was like, I know that. But blaming them, I was like, I'm not having it.
No, I can't do that. I couldn't do that either.
That triggered me more. It was like, why are you forcing me to blame somebody?
Yes,
That's why I went on this path of the realization and awakening. I said, I much rather be with my discomfort without dishonoring my parents. So when I saw this sentence, it triggered in me it provoked something inside of me and said, I do honor and love them, but yet I could, you brought it so close together, like the law of allowance plus this. And I don't think many, because there are many individuals like us, right, who have got being part of partition or from the partition side. Our lives have been more than one culture. Because you also adopted a lot of that culture, or the parents or the ancestors adopted a lot of the other culture as well, but through the lens of fear.
Yes, that's right.
So everything then gets brought along. And like you said, in your mom's case also, she saw fear of the potential of humanity can do to humanity. So when you're saying allowance, to get to that point must have been taken a lot from you to also look inward. So what did it take in your life for that to just be going through? Because when I read your book, it was like something that had to happen in the wasting of life to have pushed it. What moment was that, and why?
I think I can say what I call in the book the pointless relationship that I had. But I bless the relationship now. It was after a few years after I amicably divorced my first husband. I had a relationship with a gentleman who, on the surface, everything was fine, but it didn't work. And, and I claim responsibility for that. It was not, what did I choose a man? Well, I wanted children, but I chose a man with a vasectomy. What was I thinking? So.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
But then the point of this, what I'm trying to say is that the heartbreak and shame of that, 3 years later, provoked in me some opening. It just forced an opening in me where I was, in a way, forced to abandon my way of the ego.
Explain.
Because I was
more,
looking.
Because I know we say it and we can get it.
Yeah, it's that I was just turned 40, and life was beginning again. I felt I was in love, and then I was traveling with him. We just went to lovely places. We came back, and then he told me he didn't want children anymore. And I went, oh right, okay, and the damage to me really was more that I didn't sort of like break off the relationship there compassionately and move on, sort of thing. And I lingered there for another year and a half or so, which doesn't make any sense, to So it showed that I did not I lacked self-love, that I was willing just to accommodate too much. And that was a powerful lesson, which I bless now. It was a painful lesson, but I needed to have that. And that then forced that into, okay, you've got to work with the universe and that have your desires clear, but also stand up for them. Why did I accept this unsuitable relationship, when in fact there were plenty of other gentlemen available who would have, I would have been able to have children with, but clearly a deeper desire for some kind of mission, whatever was in place. I didn't, I was looking to write a book, but I didn't know what it was until after that we split up. And then I was walking around Kew Gardens and then saw a sculpture, a marble statue of an angel head. And that was it. The idea for the book came.
You called the angel the compassionate.
Oh, yes. The angel actually, the angel that, don't ask me where that came from. It just came down when I was writing. The angel of compassionate condemnation.
Yes, you believe me. I was like, what a paradox. I was like, oh, hold on. I got to take this in again.
Yes.
I was like, compassionate condemnation.
Yes.
Please, I've only started reading the first few chapters of the book. So tell me more.
Yeah.
Just came to you.
Is because
but what does that mean for you?
For me, it was that that angel, that particular angel, helps you create the hell you feel you deserve, so that you can experience it, and then you can then release yourself from it. So because of the depth of my shame was so much, it somehow triggered a parallel story with this lady, Clara, who was actually my muse all along, and so in a way she mirrored what I was feeling, but on a much grander, epic scale. She caused the deaths of all these people because she made a mistake when she was an empress, and yeah.
That was a heavy sigh.
Yes, but I was in this space where writing sometimes to go into a kind of trance, and this is what scared me initially. I found the writing sessions quite frightening because I just thought, oh my God, what's going to come down now? Will this make any sense? I was overthinking. Now I wish I could tell my younger self, just relax and write down anything. It doesn't matter. Later on, you shape it. Just be with the words coming through. It's a gift.
Do you think this book is about talking to your younger self?
Partly, I think, yes, partly, but also initially it was talking to my younger self, but then with editing and working with my editor, I aimed to make it serve the reader more in having them rethink their lives and hopefully liberate and awaken them.
Well, okay, so you initially started it's about healing your younger self, I would imagine, yes. Partly. And then later on, it became more reader first. Were there any parts of the book you wish you didn't have to take out and your editor told you to take out?
No, actually, she wanted me to put more things in. It was like, no, I can't do that. I can't write this. So in fact, there's the only thing that she asked me to take out, and it's excellent, Dr. Liz, who was a brilliant editor, in that she saw what I was trying to do. Yeah. Because I couldn't see anymore. When you're that close to the writing, everything's a blur. But
yes.
She said to me, no, take out where it philosophizes too much. And I went, that's funny, because they're the points, they're the parts I don't like either. And then she said, but add more, make the philosophizing more personal to Clara, which I did, and also add more anecdotes of my career in banking, for example, and because it was a unique experience at the time. And
why was it unique?
Well, no, I mean you didn't see many women on the trading floor at these big banks.
Oh, you were on? Yes, of course, you were on the trading floor. You've had quite an interesting career.
It's a mad career.
I'll leave the bio. I'll put the bio in, but I was like, you went from that to that to that.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah. And I
Ooh.
spent 4 years in international athletics as a project assistant, organizing events. And, so I met Olympic champions, and I met people who'd been like Olympic champions 30 years earlier. And it transformed the way I looked at health and aging. Because the one thing these guys had in common, okay, they were gold medalists of, I don't know, 1952 Helsinki Olympics or something like that. But they all still trained a little bit every day. Many of them were vegetarian, which, in the 90s, if you said you were vegetarian, they thought you were completely out of your tree. And it was difficult in restaurants to find something that was vegetarian.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, at the time. And I mean, I wasn't vegetarian until 2010. I was eating fish or something only after 1990s. But even then, even if I said I don't do red meat or chicken or anything, any land animals, people just thought I was crazy. Really, in the 90s. But I said, no, it just doesn't work for me. And then, of course, I went vegan a few years back, and it's like, forget it. It's just like...
Just slowing it down.
No, it's just like...
And in the banking, so how did you get onto the trade floor?
I was working at a charity, a non-profit, on human rights and genocide of all things. I did just as a volunteer. I was just taking a career break. And
That's a heck of a career break.
I know, it was a bit of a career break, but it gave me an insight into how governments work, how armed opposition groups work, whether they're freedom fighters or terrorist groups and things, because everything has a structure. And so it was really powerful to be there. But then one day, one of the employees there, one of my colleagues said, she used to be a bond trader. And so a really charming lady. She said she had a call from her headhunter and said they needed help with some headhunting. Could you help them? You can speak a bit of Spanish, you can speak Italian, you can speak French. So I said, okay, I'll go with this. So I spent the day with this headhunter in the city. They were just trying to find some equity options traders around Spain. So I would just make phone calls. That's all I did, made phone calls, tracked down people, got their names, whether they'd be interested. And then one of the headhunters said, right, I think you know what you're doing. We need to get you a job in the city. And I went, what? and there was a shortage at the time of a particular derivative brokers in the city. And they said, why don't we just train you up? Why didn't you get you in front of the right bankers? And you'll be fine. And so I did. They told me who to go and meet, just chat with them, network a little bit. And then they put me, then I had an interview with a brokers in London Bridge and got a job. And the first thing they asked me was, we sometimes
It's a very male-oriented job as well.
It is very male. I mean, I remember the interviewer asked me, portly gentleman and a middle-aged gentleman asked me saying, well, normally we have difficulty with, employing women because they've got to be home to cook dinner for their husbands and all that. And I went,
oh my God.
I know. I said, my husband is self-sufficient. He can cook. And secondly, I need a job. I got bills to pay. He's at law school. And they went, okay, then you got a job. And he was. I bless him. Unfortunately, he died during the pandemic, my ex-husband. But, intelligent man, and he took it on, and he was great at the time. But that's how I worked in a brokerage firm. When that brokerage firm went belly up, I think, and is that right? Yeah, I think it was all taken over. And a friend of mine, I made a friend there who then went to Chase Manhattan Bank. It was called Chase Manhattan at the time. And he recruited me to work on a trading floor, full on, trading desk. And so I was an assistant there for a while. It was very, very interesting experience. And I mentioned in the book my different experiences.
Yeah, that's what I was going to come back to that. So why did your editor wanted to go put it back in? Why?
She wanted more anecdotes about, because I wrote about, working there was fun. It was hard work, but fun. So she wanted more examples of what it was like to be on a trading floor. And so I changed the names of some of my colleagues, but it would mention, what in honourable ways, what my experiences were, what I did. And I spent a week at a business school in France learning some advanced trading techniques of the theory behind it all, and had really interesting experiences just being there, sort of thing. And But yeah, so it's was useful at the time. Yes.
So while you're writing, you're looking back, it's like a memoir. You look back on your life, you're in this, you said you're in this trance, but do you feel like you were dialoguing with the past as well?
Not so, I mean, I don't think dialoguing with the past so much. I remember had to spend a lot of time remembering, digging up memories, I suppose, in a way. But then the dialogue more was from a more enlightened perspective. So I can see, I can see how I behaved then, but with more compassion rather than, oh God, I can't stand who I was then or whatever. It was more about with more compassion.
What is the greatest gift that you learned from this book about yourself?
I think to be playful and to be open and and also, don't be so bloody judgmental all the time, because I mean, don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to say bloody, but the
No, don't apologize.
It's just more about we don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything that's going on, and that I think for me, following my heart is the biggest gift. Have the courage to follow my heart. Yeah, that's it.
When we first talked and you went down and you said, things I wish I knew when I was younger. And the book is, when I read the book, I almost see the reflection of it. I do. And it's beautiful. You have so many profound sentences, and I go, "Ooh, I got to write these down and just put it aside." And I almost think that it's one of those books that you could have these profound sentences and just stick them on your wall. Because that's me. I get one sentence, and I need to sit and chew on it and go deep inside of it, and that's one of them. And it got me thinking, and I've been thinking about this, about regrets, and that's when I always think about, what would I tell my younger self? And I almost think I don't regret anything. Even the horrible, painful moments in my life or my arrogance, I don't regret it in a certain way. I regret, but don't regret, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, when we were talking about going back to our 20s and 30s, a lot of, if a 20 or 30-year-old would listen to this, would they be ready to listen to all that wisdom that we had in our 60s or 50s?
I think the younger people today, yes. If you'd asked me that 20 years ago, I don't think so. But today's generation are different.
How?
They've been through COVID. They've seen people. They've seen the insanity of government policies. They've seen things crumble in front of their eyes, and they're seeing a lot of their friends dying now. So it's forcing a huge spiritual awakening.
I find it so surprising, don't you? Because with all that they learned about mindfulness, which was even before we went into lockdown, all the work on spiritual, on mental health and everything that's there, yet it's still at its worst. Why? Why do you feel?
I think there's a lot more to contend with today. It's like, with social media, the mainstream news, it's designed to cause insanity. It's actually designed to cause mental instability because your focus is distracted. In order for governments to rule us, they have to keep us in a state of fear and anxiety. Yeah, it is. I mean, no, it's I mean, I hate to say this, but I've seen too many instances where, oh, right, that's what they were doing all along. And it's like treating science like it's a religion, that you have to believe that and trust the science. I kept hearing that, and I thought, that is crazy. I have a science degree. I studied science at university. I did not become a scientist out of choice. But you're supposed to question the science. That's what makes it rigorous. That's what makes it and you weren't allowed to question the science in during the pandemic.
I pretty much align with that, and I think you wrote this thing that I really like. Losing the ability to trust another is sad. Losing the ability to trust oneself is a tragedy.
Yes.
And I just thought, that
exactly.
Pretty much helped. And for me, I always find when I speak to individuals and they keep throwing science at me, put in the facts, put into this. And I go, but to me, facts interpreted is still subjective.
Yes, of course it is.
There's
always a story. I mean, there's a network marketing phrase that's very powerful. It says, facts tell, but stories sell. Stories sell.
Very true. And that's why when you're talking about relying so much on science, and they say science doesn't lie, it's like, but who's telling the story?
Yeah, exactly. Where does the funding come from for that particular research project?
Yeah.
Or that study? And you find if you dig behind it, it's that, oh, really? There's a vested interest.
That's true, because I'm thinking back of how when the jabs came out,
yes, and
everybody was like, do this, and then they didn't realize that they completely did not take another ethnicity into account.
Yes, that's right. We all have different sensitivities.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting that you put it down that way. And then you're because when you see, especially around ethnicity stuff and science, you notice how your trust gets put into limbo very quickly, because they tell you to trust, but then you don't know who does this favor.
Yes.
So I can understand why you're saying that. So when I come back to like reading, like so I said, I've only read 3 chapters and literally I've taken out 6-7 quotes right there.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
And I'm just like, okay, well, so I can only imagine as I continue to read this book, there's going to be a lot more, because now I'm reading about, which I found very interesting, because it taps into this feminist side that I didn't realize I had. When you start talking about, the male side of stuff, when you get to Zoran and James, not to give much out. And so I'm like, oh, so I'm finding it. You had written also about spiritual poverty, and I was trying to look for it, and you tied it into the government. So very early on in the book, you talk about these really golden things that have your realizations, I would
yes
like to call it. So why a stone? Was it only because you saw it at Q, or? But I found it very interesting you chose a stone to be your, almost like the narrator at first for this, or the spiritual guidance in that way, or spiritual narrator. Why a stone?
All I can think of, I mean, it just came, that's a statue. But I remember when I was a young girl, I went with my father to Florence, and my sister, we went to Florence, and we went to the different galleries, and we saw these incredible statues.
Besides David?
Besides David, I think I don't even remember David. There was the Rape of Proserpine and Persephone or something, and I remember being like a foot away from this marble statue, pristine white marble, I mean, the stone, but it felt like it was alive. The feeling in my heart when I saw these works of art was, I felt that you just click your fingers and those figures would come alive. So I think that was embedded deep inside me. And then my mother coming from southern Italy, and there were marble caves near my grandfather's farm, and there was some mining done with the marble. But the particular marble that is in that that I saw in Italy with my father in Florence would have been Carrara marble, which is mined further north, sort of thing. But it's, but I just felt, and also because, I have crystals all over my desk, I have got, this sort of thing. This is a smoky quartz, something you can't really see there. But, and there's also a feeling that they contain energy. They can contain a spirit. Some kind of subtle energy is there.
Okay, so hence why you had chosen.
So something about crystals, about stone, and then I even read about Carrara marble that is actually a crystalline structure. It's basically made of same as chalk, calcium carbonate, limestone, but the particular crystalline structure allows light to come through, so you get this translucence. So yeah, I even bought, I think, at one time under my laptop, I kept a marble slab, a tile. I bought in a sort of, a homeware store or one of those, builders merchants, because I wanted to feel what Carrara marble felt like while I was writing.
Because we always talk about the wall, or, we put up the barrier, and it's always related with a different, like it's like dead. But you've made it come alive.
Yes.
And said, well, no, it's not dead.
No, they're not dead. They transmit. They can transmit energy. So So, I mean, all our electronics have crystals in them. This comes from advanced technology that we didn't invent, apparently. But was
apparently.
That's it. All our technology devices, that advanced circuitry, did not come from humans.
So you've just published this book.
Mm-hmm.
What next?
Well,
besides
the
screenplay with Sister.
Oh no! I think I'd like to record the audio edition. So that will produce that, and and the next book is. I'm playing with something to do with men. A kind of love letter to men, some love story for men. That's all that's coming. I don't have quite. But then I think men need healing. There's something that
they do, right?
No, there is some kind of, but I think I'm not. It's some kind of love story, but it's for men. A romance that men will read. I can't quite. Some transcendental love story that will blow the mystery of what it is, so that. Falling in love and meeting the one, it's like, a treasure in life, so, and I'd like to, and I think I'd like to blow the mystery of that open and have people be empowered about, following their heart.
I know you've spoken to this about following your heart. So let's say somebody in their 20s and 30s is listening to this. Or even in their 40s, because I find when I went into my 40s, I underwent a very big, it's a massive transition stage.
Yes,
it's not
right.
a 1 year thing or a 2 year thing. It's a good 10 years of, like you said, it's like a stone. I feel like I had the society stone around me, and now it's just chips away in my 40s. You're chipping away, and then you show up. That's how I see it. What would be the 5 things you would tell yourself? Off the bat, 5.
I'd say 5 or 5 things. I don't know. Well,
All right. So, what was your takeaway? Of course, did you head over to Amazon and get her book? I hope so. There is a part 2 to this section. We spoke for over an hour, and I will be placing it in my newsletter. If you haven't signed up yet, now is a good time. She will share with you her top tips. I did nudge her for those. I hope it inspired you. And if it did, please, please, please share it out with somebody. Have a good one. Take care.